near Tampa. When he developed the neutrino light detectors, he got a national security order from the NRO, National Reconnaissance Office. It runs a lot of these top secret satellite systems, and they confiscated the invention and the technologies to use for covert purposes, which is actually happens quite frequently. That story is, been confirmed by a number of people since then, such as the man who recently came forward out of the Technology Management Office in the Pentagon regarding systems that were on satellites that could target and did target during the Iraq War a certain volume of space, and they could switch on the satellite and the aircraft in that zone. Once we cleared our own aircraft out, would fall out of the sky like rocks and crash. And in fact, that's how most of Saddam Hussein's Air Force was destroyed, according to this source inside the Pentagon, who had baseline clearance across about 18 of these top secret unacknowledged special access projects. So, a lot of these are data points that I've heard various aspects of. A couple months ago, was reached out to by Mr. Hecker, and he told me about an incident where he was involved, involving the South Pole. So I think, Eric, if you can give people, assume everyone on this call or this show know absolutely nothing. I don't jump over into a lot of technical gobbledygook speak, if you don't mind, because I don't think very few people are physicists or electromagnetic engineers here. This is a general population and not the physicists that we're talking to. So if you can just tell about what, when and where and what you saw, and just go through what you directly saw and experienced.
You got it. First and foremost, let me just let everybody know, I spent an entire year at the South Pole Station on the maintenance crew. And the IceCube neutrino detector was simply one facility of many that I paid attention to there. And in that process, I obviously learned the science and stuff like that. Like you said, it's a lot of mumbo jumbo that people don't really need to know about, but that's the pretense that it's presented to the world, that the National Science Foundation cut a check for this facility at the South Pole Station and is doing science, wonderfully complex science. But what I have come to find out is that this device, not only is it a passive observational scientific device that is massive and embedded in the ice at the South Pole, it also transmits. I provided documentation for it. Anybody can look it up now. It is referenceable on the internet. I call it the DOM document, and it's on the archives at my website. But what it states is that this device, which has 5,160 DOMs, which is a digital optical module. The idea is that it's observing the neutrino interaction when it hits the nucleus of an ice molecule down there. That's what it's supposed to be built to do. But I found in the paperwork that each of these DOMs also can transmit up to 2,047 volts per DOM. That makes this a giant, powerful, active phased array system, which I am now doing due diligence to let the world know what that means. And the possibilities list is huge. Because
so before we go out too far into that,
ahead.
let's deal with the basics here, is what I was wanting you to talk about.
You got it.
I know you were there working for Raytheon.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so let's go through that. You were assigned there for a year working with Raytheon. It was year X to Y. I mean, just, the whole thing before we get into a lot of the technical.
You got it. So so November of 2010, I landed on the ice at McMurdo Station and was rapidly deployed further south to 90 degrees at the South Pole Station. I stayed there for the 365 days. That employment, that time period, I guess, was for the summer season. We had about we peaked out at close to 280 personnel at the site in the summer season. The winter season we went down to 49, and the neutrino detector was something that I was pretty much obligated to go out to every single day. The the equipment was so much. This is another thing that I learned that's peculiar, is there's actually so much computer processing equipment. And remember, this is the South Pole Station in the wintertime. My job required me to go out there, and people laugh at me for this and get mad, but I say it. We had chicken wire on a air inlet duct, like a snorkel duct, that the snorkel side went up to and connected to the building, and there was louvers there that were temperature activated louvers. So the processing of these computers made so much heat that in order to cool it down, they were opening the louvers to transfer exterior air in to keep these computers cold. People really, I mean, think about that. I mean, this is a building it's sometimes minus 80 degrees outside. To think that you need that type of cooling capacity, and that was what my job was to make sure this building wasn't overheating in the middle of winter at the South Pole.
And why don't you describe, I know you've told me before, but for the audience, the size, the depth of the array, how big it was, how far down under the ice it was.
You got it.
Et cetera. I mean, see, again, I want to get, so people have a visual
you got it.
of what we're talking about here, because otherwise, none of this makes any sense. So you got to, let's paint a picture
you got it.
of the facility, the size of the array, how deep it was. Was it operational when you got there? Was it operational later? All that detail.
You got it. So first and foremost, the central facility where all the processing happens is sitting atop the ice at South Pole Station, which is 10,300 feet actual elevation. And that is ice above Earth. So the IceCube drillers first had to go and drill. They would steam drill down and go basically 2 miles down, close to a 32 to 34 inch diameter hole, and they would drop a string cable down with all of these DOMs on it. Each one of those holes was drilled down, and it was drilled in a giant hexagon that covered kilometers of area in a length and width dimension, and then as far as the depth, going all the way down close to Earth at approximately 2 miles down to that. And everything was cabled and went back to the central building where all the processing computer server towers were and all that stuff. And that was the facility that was being accessed every day and made to be chilled.
Now, apparently this was being built and developed by Raytheon. Is that right?
Yes, that's correct. In the season that I was there, which was so fall 2010 was when I arrived. We transitioned. It was right around, I think, January or February that IceCube officially transitioned from from construction to operations and maintenance. Same thing with the elevated station itself, actually, that year.
Okay. And the system, what were the people there told about why it was there and what it was doing, allegedly?
The intended purpose for the IceCube neutrino detector was to detect neutrinos through the muon creation, which was when a neutrino coming from anywhere, in any direction, it could be from the other side of the planet, from off planet, through the planet, it doesn't matter. But when any of those neutrinos smashes into the nucleus of the water molecule, which is in the extremely pure ice. There's nothing else in there, so that's kind of why they're doing it, because they know it's a concentration of something specific, which is just pure water, great product. When it hits the nucleus, there's two things that occur. A blue flash of light, and the neutrino and the nucleus are destroyed, and a new product called a muon is created. The detector is searching for the blue flash of light. So whatever direction it comes from, it would make like a blast through the array, that when it would hit the nucleus, it would be like a reaction through all of the different DOMs, because they're optical modules and they're receiving at that point. On the receiving end, there's just a bloom that shows up in the array. And from that bloom and the amount of light that hits each DOM, they can triangulate the direction from which the neutrino came from. I was told that they would then take that information, transmit it to all the different telescopes in the world, and then that would allow them to then look, because they're so curious as to what neutrinos are and where they come from.
And so that was what they were telling you, is that this was a observation technology related to astrophysics or astronomy somehow.
Absolutely, that's correct.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what did you discover it actually is used for?
Quite much more. The ability to transmit is a big deal, and I know a lot of people may not necessarily understand what that means. So I want to, I want to paint a picture for them. It's one thing to say that, and the government does this all the time. They sidestep stuff.
Mm-hmm.
It would be like if somebody walked up to you and they had something you had never ever seen before in your life, and they were just simply calling it a bullet carrier. It's a bullet carrier. It carries bullets. But if they never told you it's a pistol or a handgun, they're being rather deceptive in what that thing does. And that's the way I now look at the IceCube neutrino detector, is that this is a savagely different device from what I was presented. And I'm trying to express to the world what that means, because it is absolutely a very big deal.
So you're convinced it was also had not only data gathering, but also offensive weapon capability.
I'm absolutely suggesting that is still on the list of things to check into. I'm a firm advocate of Occams Razor, that every possibility is left on the table, and I have to assess each one. And the split second I can negate something as a possibility, I will apply Occams Razor, cut it off, and remove it. But so far, everything that's left on the table is still possible. And there's a lot to be said for the potential of directed energy weapons.
Yeah, we can get into that in a moment, but I'm trying to stick with, the things that are factually happened and observed, and then we can talk about implications and our assessment in a moment. You told me a very interesting thing that happened the instant they switched this system on. The New Zealand event.
I have a high suspicion that this is when it was going active and they were dialing things in, and that they caused the Christchurch accident. That was during my season 2010.
You're referring to the earthquake.
Absolutely, yes. Yep, I believe that they were dialing it in, and there was a high probability that was just a misfire. And
a side effect. See, one of the things that people, just to give a little background, a lot of people have heard me refer in the past of scalar and longitudinal electromagnetic energy, which, just to give people, not to geek out too far here, but when you look at a normal light wavelength, there's a wave to it like this, and a laser is coherent light where all the green spectrum is lined up. When you're doing something with the longitudinal scalar waves are actually a point that goes out longitudinally without the wave, and is much faster than the speed of light, literally, and the normal speed of light is still light, it's still electromagnetic field, but it also can be weaponized. So the early one of the euphemisms that are used, you were talking about the euphemism of this being some kind of, like a bullet carrier, when really it's a gun. People don't realize that when J. Edgar Hoover was written to by the field agent there in Roswell, the memo we have that's now become the most viewed document on the FBI website officially states that there was a new, quote, radar array at Roswell. In fact, what that is often used at, people I have here, I'm in Washington right now, who have worked in these systems, radar is often a euphemism or a catch-all phrase for not only a passive detection of an aircraft or bouncing waves off the metal skin of an aircraft, radar, but also an active warfare system, and they will piggyback them together. So this is a common motif. It's a pattern that I've seen over the last 30 years of working in this area. And I know that it's also true that the operational systems that were not only the neutrino light detectors on satellites in the, almost 50 years ago now, in the early mid-70s, those were, quote, slaved to active systems that were longitudinal scalar directional energy weapon type systems that would then lock on. Now, why is that important? When an interstellar vehicle is stepping down, let's call it, out of transdimensional space-time, you know, resonating beyond the speed of light, matter, electrons as we think of it. That's that whole area of physics that's been kept secret. When they are going from that into this dimension full on, the very first thing that happens is a big burst of neutrino light. And that's why the National Reconnaissance Office that runs all the really super secret satellite systems up in space wanted this man's invention and system back in the early 70s. So we know that those systems have been used for detection connected to offensive weapon targeting purposes for that long. I think it's a stepping the game up quite a bit. If in fact there is a similar system ground-based at the South Pole. And one thing you mentioned, I want to emphasize, neutrinos go straight through the Earth, matter, anywhere unimpeded. So the fact that it's on the South Pole doesn't mean that it can only pick up neutrino bursts that are coming from the direction of the South Pole out into space. It can pick it up circumferentially everywhere.
Yep. Yeah, a lot of people make that error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I actually have an understanding. My ex-father-in-law passed away, but before he passed away, he had informed me that when he was in the Army way back when in World War II, he was in a very special detail that was working with the first microwave line of sight radar. Excuse me. And it was very special stuff. He was super top secret. They never left the country. And they were ordered to write letters as if they were in the European front.
Mm-hmm. Right, right. Yeah, well, a lot of people don't realize that these sort of electromagnetic fields and experimentation, these go back to the late 1800s.
Correct.
And the early 1900s. If you look at this historically, this is why, you know, I at some point, maybe in the near future, I want to work on a documentary that's a special 2-hour deep dive going back over 100 years on the sort of hidden electromagnetic and related technologies. You know, because obviously they can be used to tap into the so-called 0 point or quantum vacuum and give us free energy and save the biosphere. But, you know, I always say this as a medical doctor, emergency doctor, that you can take a knife to put butter on your bread or to slice someone's throat. And unfortunately, the latter is what's been going on in these covert programs, because they've all been hoovered up like a giant vacuum cleaner into covert, unacknowledged special access projects and developed for military purposes. And this is an enormous problem, because most of those sort of systems, by the way, you know, if you bring something like this up to someone, you know, in the White House or even most directors of the CIA and or members of Congress and Senate Intelligence Committee, they know absolutely nothing. I mean, when I say nothing, I mean zero about this. That's a problem. I mean, it's a huge problem because there's no oversight on it. So tell us a little bit more of what your research into this has uncovered, and any other people that you've stayed in touch with who have still worked in that facility, and,
I think
and what the status of it now, 10 years on.
I think it's perfect where you were just at, because I think the reason those people are ignorant about these types of projects is because of compartmentalization of information. And it's amazing, because here I am, somebody who actually wintered at the South Pole Station, and from a crew. I mean, these are limited numbers of people on the planet that do this. And even of that crew, I'm one of the few that was able to see through the compartments. So yes, I've stayed in contact with people, because a lot of this has been getting in touch with folks and saying, hey, you know what? You remember that time that such and such happened? And we had to respond, and this was what we were told, and this was what was going on. What if we look at it this way? I need to talk to you. So a lot of that has happened. I've absolutely been in touch with a lot of the hands from my crew. One of the main reasons that I'm coming forward is because I've maintained that contact, and I do believe these people have been negatively impacted by what I believe are now called directed energy weapons. That, you know, that people have suffered. There are physical things that happen to people that are near this equipment when they're figuring out how it works. And then also I believe that because we had a potential to go offensively, I believe there's a potential for us to have been attacked.
Now, what kind of symptoms you're referring? I'm now to sort of biological and brainwave problems that people have had. I know we talked about this before when I first had a conversation with you. Can you go into that? What sort of sequela, we'd say in medicine, have people experienced?
A lot of it has to do with the list of things that are coming out now on the Havana syndrome list. So I apologize for not having all the medical terminology correct.
No, that's fine.
But I'm just dealing with the folks and what they're telling me. They're having memory issues. They're having a lot of trouble sleeping. They're having issues with temperature rise out of nowhere. These things are all peculiar to me. I mean, I'm not trying to justify it or anything. I'm just telling you what people are griping, and this is becoming more and more prevalent. It's kind of why I came out of the shadows, because I was noticing this in my life and my crew, but now I'm seeing things like, since last we spoke, we have the Directed Energy Threat Emergency Response Act has come out as a House resolution. You know, the Department of Defense has issued guidelines for their personnel how to report these symptoms internally so they can take care of it appropriately.
Right.
So this stuff's getting very real in just the last couple of weeks. And
yeah, it's been a lot in the mainstream news. Those of you who haven't heard about this, our embassy in Havana had a lot of personnel that had some kind of directional energy weapon targeted them. There's been more recent ones in other countries at various facilities, and they have experienced this whole sort of constellation of symptoms, you know, migraine, sleeplessness, you know, emotional instability, you know, big mood swings, you know, and other physical problems, including what, you know, what you're referring to, feeling like you're having a fever or what have you. Now, I remember this all goes back to this whole area of, let's call it forbidden science, that deals with a scalar, longitudinal, transdimensional physics is what it's been called, that deal with these kinds of electromagnetic fields. It's a little, I liken it a little bit to people, you know, working unwittingly near the Hanford reactor, you know, and ended up getting radiation poisoning, or people who were near a downwind from the plumes of the atomic bombs being tested. You know, there's a lot going on. And of course, the government never wants to admit that people are being injured by anything like this they're doing, because they don't even acknowledge the project exists. This is one of the big problems, is that if you're not going to even acknowledge the fact that these technologies are extant, that they're already all over the place, and because they're that classified, then obviously you're going to deny the symptomatology resulting from those technologies being deployed or used, even if the negative effects on people are secondary, not the intended one. Although I will say the so-called radionic psychotronic type systems are not a mythology. Those exist and have been developed quite thoroughly over the last 70, 80 years or more, and are also weapon systems.
There's a phrase in the military when they come with systems that maintain plausible deniability, and they say things like plausible deniability must be maintained.
Yes,
that means when there's collateral damage and fallout, plausible deniability will be maintained. They're not going to discuss what happened. There will be a cover story. You'll get some swamp gas spiel.
Right. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So what else have you discovered? I know you mentioned there was one supervisor who was there, a woman who became, even while you were there, became seemingly unhinged.
You just read my mind. That was right where I was going. Our station manager made the news when we were there. This is all referenceable. She was having great issue, I would just say. We'll put it that way. I'm certainly not a doctor, but I'm a winter rover South Pole expert, and from my knowledge and experience of being a winter rover at the South Pole, she seemed to be in the throes of what is medically called winter rover syndrome. They've done studies. There's a certain mechanism of failure to the psyche that occurs typically when you go down the wrong path there, I guess to say, and she seemed to be in that situation. And at the time, she was under the impression, I believe, that she believed she had a stroke. But it turned out that it didn't seem she had a stroke. I believe that she believed it, but I think this was, again, an impact from something that occurred during our winter season there, that she and others, there was an event that negatively impacted everybody. We had a drill. There was a drill out by our radio systems, our radio array, and it was her idea to set up a drill. We had all kinds of response teams, fire teams, medical teams, and the idea was in the harsh climate to test all of our equipment and get out there. Long story short is either A, that equipment wasn't properly isolated by accident or on purpose, or some other thing was going on, and I still don't know. But that event messed up a lot of folks.
Oh, okay.
And the powers that be want to call it a whole bunch of other stuff, but that's just one singular event that I know that it wasn't as presented. People were negatively impacted. Nobody was really talking about it. There was a lot of compartmentalization, and I would say misinformation and disinformation being spread around, because to this day I still don't know exactly what happened there, and I'm still looking into it.
Okay. And how many were there other people at the base when they switched the system on and this Christchurch, New Zealand devastating earthquake happened that sort of sensed like, oops, there's something related here?
I would not have been in that info stream at that time.
Okay. But since then you've learned of folks who... Yes,
that absolutely, that was the thought going on. They were very aware. It was rather rapid, I think when you pull the trigger on something like that, you kind of know the target that you're looking for, and whether you hit the bullseye or on the paper, you're still aware.
So this array is 2 miles deep. How far across is it?
Oh, it's I would say a couple of miles across would be my best guesstimate. I don't have it on this map here. I'm sorry. I have a different map.
Yep. Well, the reason I bring that up, I mean, this is not something a lot of times I'll have military and intel or contractors come forward with information, and I sit on it until I get another point of corroboration. Because, you don't want something to just be purely apocryphal one-off, as we say in science, an N of one. So some years ago, I was given a lecture in Phoenix, and this commonly happens. There were hundreds of people there, and at the end of it, there was this middle-aged man with 2 people with him, were clearly with him as friends, protectors, who waited till everyone cleared out. And he told me that he had been in Alaska, deployed on a ship that was under contract. It was a private corporation under contract with the National Security Agency. And this ship had a special scalar electromagnetic system on it. And they went down to the area off of Indonesia over that subduction zone. And when they turned that system on, it caused that massive earthquake. It killed 250,000 people. And he was so disturbed by this that he went off the grid, got an old car without GPS, drove from Alaska to Phoenix with these 2 security people to hand this information off to me. He was shaken. I mean, there's no question that he was telling me the truth of what he knew about this. Now, again, whether that was an intentional or an incidental event, the implication from him was that they were testing a weapon system that could destabilize unstable areas of the Earth's crust and put them past the tipping point for an earthquake. And when you told me this story about this system being switched on and the Christchurch earthquake, I put that in there with this information from this guy who was on the ship and witnessed this happen, who took a lot of time and trouble to try to hand this information off to us.
I actually believe that a component like that, along with a component at the South Pole system, is how these larger systems actually work. That there's something else going on because the South Pole station is relatively stationary. I mean, granted, a phased ray system like that has some level of tunability as far as direction, but to have it be able to work in conjunction with something else like this floating system that you're talking about is par for the course. I mean, that's what I'm finding doing the research on the science, is that there's different ways. It's like having a recording studio. When you connect the wire to this piece this way and the other one this way, you get different functions.
Well, and in reality, what I've learned, over the years, as people come forward, that they are based on satellites in space. They're mobile on aircraft and ships. Mm-hmm. They're on land, and they're under the water. There's a huge array under the water, what some people would call the Bermuda Triangle area. I have a military witness who was in a helicopter, military, flying over that area, and it was very clear, and he could see this massive array. It was a very restricted area under the water in the South Atlantic there, Northern Caribbean.
Mm-hmm. Would this be like the SOSUS array? Is it something similar to that?
He was not a technical guy. Okay. He just said there were these massive triangular, obviously electronic arrays that were underneath the water, visible when it was really clear water like that. And he didn't have any other information at all. It was an incidental observation when he was being flown over this restricted airspace.
Yeah, it is my understanding that the United States Navy has a substantial amount of hydrophones that they call, they call it the SOSUS array, that most of the oceans of the world they're listening to passively.
Yeah, this seemed more than that. From what he described, I suspect it was both active and passive. Mm-hmm. Although they, if it ever leaked out, I'm sure they'd say it was purely a passive data gathering system. But that's the usual cover.
Exactly. I'm just spewing the Navy commercial.
Mm-hmm. Right. Mm-hmm. So, what else have you discovered since then? I know it's been a decade or so since you left.
There's one more thing that I do want to add about my time there that I did discover. Now, this is something that I don't have documentation for. The other things that I've been discussing so far, I can document. But just in the standard of my work at the South Pole Station and my experience, I proved it. The ELF, the extra low frequency system, is also energized. I learned that firsthand when I was there. It's not something that I can document. I didn't know at the time how important it was. But just doing my regular workload, I came across some equipment I had to de-energize. So safety's sake, we have to go over, find the correct circuit breaker panel, lock out the breaker panel, put a lock on it, tag it, make everything official so everything's safe and nobody can hurt themselves. I'm going through the standard motions of doing this, but now in this sub panel that I'm at, I'm checking the circuits, and it's, this is energized, de-energized, energized, and all of a sudden there's a switch that's out. It's on when it's supposed to be off. So now it gives me pause because something's not right. So I'm like, all right, I have to go check with the engineer for what's going on. How come everything's not matching? At that point, I become informed that the ELF breaker that's on, that I was under the impression it's supposed to be off because it's off. That's what I was told. It's off. I was wrong. I was told it's on, and it stays on, and it's supposed to be on. So go back to what you're doing. And I went back to what I was doing, now with full knowledge that the ELF system is not de-energized. And that's a big deal also. So again,
why don't you tell people listening what ELF is, what it can be used for, what it does? I think a lot of people may not be familiar with the science of ELFs.
ELF is again, going back to Nikola Tesla type stuff, and it's very complex. It's a huge antenna array again. Now we're talking, again, miles and miles of antenna embedded in the ice. One of the things that it could be used for, they said was used for way back when, was submarine communications globally, which is a really interesting thing. They're also stating to be using it for science, for the measuring of the magnetosphere, which is very interesting to certain aspects of science that I love, and what's been going on with the temperature of our planet, and many, many interesting things can be understood from observing the magnetosphere. But again, since they're not telling anybody it's on, I don't think it's being simply used for such common things. I think there's a more nefarious aspect to this component. That's where I'm at so far.
So what do you think that could be used for that would be not just communication and passive?
According to the work of Dr. James Giordano, who gives us the new topic of the battlefield of the mind, ELF and the South Pole Station's IceCube neutrino detector, these things are right on the list of directed energy weapons and V2K and all kinds of horrible things that I don't want to think about, but I have to impress upon people that there are folks that think of these things, that like to manufacture these devices under the pretense that, well, what if our enemies come up with it first? That's how this stuff happens.
You said V2K. You want to tell people what V2K means?
Yes, the V2K is voice to skull, and this is an actual technology that's been around for quite some time, and it was even put to use in the Desert Storm conflict to disarm our enemies. There is a way to put a voice to transmit into somebody else's head in their own voice a message. So this is an interesting thing, actually, because when you look on the list of the Havana syndrome stuff, which they're now actually calling AHI, anomalous health incidents, which is a wonderful, benign term. But the funny thing is they keep being very vague. They're saying that on the list of symptoms is people hearing strange sounds. That's V2K, folks. They're not going to be more specific than that right now. But what that means is they're hearing information coming into their own head in their own voice. And I would suggest this is what our ancestors were impressing upon us, to know thyself. Because way back when, there was a technique that they could do this by. Contemporarily, we're dealing with the technology that can pull it off.
Well, it's interesting. It can also be in someone else's voice.
It could. Yes.
A lot of people, if you look carefully at what happened with Carol Rosin, who was Wernher von Braun's spokesperson for the last 4 or 5 years of her life, when he got sick, he sent her out to give his speeches. And she had been a school teacher and then became an aerospace, one of the first women in aerospace industry, Fairchild Industries back in the 70s. And she stood up in front of this huge gathering to give his speech, and this V2K system switched on. But it was Wernher von Braun speaking, and she just repeated what he was saying. And I mean, most people would sound like, wow, this sounds like schizophrenia, as a doctor and someone who in the emergency department has seen plenty of, really severely mentally ill people with delusional systems. But no, this is a very specific system, and it's not tinfoil hat stuff. This has been around for some time. And remember, that was in 74 or 5, I think. You can imagine what, 50 years or 70 years of classified, unacknowledged special access projects, trillions of dollars, of what the payoff has been in this whole basket of technologies, the sort of secret, highly classified technologies, not just energy and propulsion, like we talk about with UFOs, ET craft, and man-made anti-gravity vehicles, but also these other sort of systems. And back in 93, 4, 5, when I was first dealing with President Clinton and his CI director and trying to get this stuff, I said, it's not just that there are these earth-saving and life-saving technologies that are being kept secret. It's that those same technologies repurposed for harmful reasons are in the hands of people who are unaccountable, who have no proper oversight, and who, many of them that I've known over the years that are in these programs are, quite frankly, sociopaths, or high functioning psychopaths. But so I think that, you get into, it's very dangerous, this kind of secrecy, when those people have those sort of technologies without any moral, ethical, or oversight of what they're doing, because they have free reign. Who's looking into this? The Senate Intelligence Committee, the president? Well, they wouldn't even be shown, as one person said, where the washroom is with the projects dealing with this. Right. So that's one of the really big problems with this kind of extreme secrecy that Eisenhower recognized. Now, he knew that there were things going on. People think all this is all newfangled. I said, look, the heyday of massive breakthroughs in a lot of this sort of science and technology happened between the 20s and the 50s. By the 60s, many of these, we already had field propulsion, so-called anti-gravity. We had energy generation systems. We had the V2K capability. We had psychotronics, radionics, ELF, I mean, all kinds of things, and scalar and longitudinal systems that had been deployed early on when they downed the first, some of the early craft near Roswell, which was the only nuclear atomic bomb squadron in the world, which is why the ETs were there, very concerned about it, because they knew that we were doing things when we detonate an atomic bomb, or worse, a nuclear bomb. There's the electromagnetic pulse everyone knows about, but there are these other energy forms that are beyond the speed of light that are released that are actually incredibly disruptive to the so-called the superhighway of communication and travel interstellar.
Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that Tesla was trying to get people to understand, is that, even though we use Hertzian wavelengths for everything that we do, it's not the only wavelength out there. There's so much more. And that was, like you were saying earlier, the scalar and the longitudinal, that's, where he was going with his transformation of energy over long distances. It was simply, people are familiar with like AC and DC transformation, or a step up or a step down transformer, where you're just simply increasing voltages. All Tesla was doing was taking something from a Hertzian wavelength, transforming it into something else. You call it scalar, call it longitudinal, call it whatever you want to call it. It was a transformation, and then he would move it from one place to another and transform it back, which is, we do this with electricity all day long in so many other ways.
Right. Sure. Yep, exactly. And, this is why, when Nikola Tesla died, the FBI came in like gangbusters and took all of his papers out of his apartment. I have a Department of Defense document, the provenance of which it was officially released, where the Department of Defense was demanding that the FBI turn those papers over to them because they knew how important they were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was what happened at Tesla's demise was really inappropriate. It wasn't supposed to go down that way at all. And I don't even know how we're not in any way trying to recover from that going down the wrong path. Has anybody done due diligence to try to get all his papers back? Or are we just sitting here confident that the government says they're not around? I mean, I myself haven't done the legwork. Do you know of anyone that's tried?
Not yet. I mean, I know for a fact that the FBI did get them. Now, here's what happens if you do a FOIA, a Freedom of Information Act request. Because of the nature of these unacknowledged special access projects, these things get diverted into a USAP that no FOIA officer, in fact, the president and Senate Intelligence Committee chairman, don't have access to. So if you send in a FOIA request, people think that's some sort of a magic bullet that's going to open the vault for you. That's just delusional, frankly. It's absolutely delusional, because they don't understand the level of compartmentalization that is beyond that. Even the Department of Justice, when they were investigating a major security breach, and it was being led out of the Technology Management Office, and there was a 3-star general that I know who was going to be prosecuted for violating security at a secure communication information facility near Fort Sill, Oklahoma. They could not pursue it because the unacknowledged special access project refused to turn over the specifics of what happened and where, because it was so highly classified that it was beyond what even the most top secret prosecutors in the Department of Justice would be given access to. So the only thing they could do was take a star off the lapel of this guy and put him out to pasture. So, which is what they did. They retired him. But I mean, I know the details of that in excruciating information, but that gives you an idea. This is why when people go, well, we can do a FOIA request. And now sometimes, I mean, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Somebody will release a tranche of material, of documents, and there'll be some gems in it. But to my knowledge, nobody has gotten, pried out of the vault, the black vault, the Tesla papers that the FBI absconded with when he died.
Yeah, yet we seem to be living in a world of where all of Tesla's wildest imaginations are just happening now in the black projects instead of, you know, for the benefit of everyone like he intended.
Sure. And this is the whole problem. And this is why I think he died a very sad and in a way bitter person. But I know so many people like that. I mean, some of the most brilliant geniuses I have ever met have spent most of their lives in a skiff, working under contract for some corporation, for the agency or whoever. But, you know, this sort of science and technology, this is the real problem, because you look at this world around us and it's a faint shadow of what it could be and should be if these technologies were being used for peaceful energy generation. And by the way, these same technologies that can create Havana syndrome type bad effects can be used for healing and for good effects. I mean, speaking as a doctor, I've seen this in an underground facility I went to on the Mexican border near El Paso. And I think this is another big area of exploration. But see, the reason that's secret, you open up a crack into that room, then you get all of these technologies, because they're all related. Right. They're all related, what, you know, in terms of the energy spectrum and all this sort of science. It's all part of a basket of related technologies.
Correct me if I'm wrong. You were an emergency medical doctor, correct? So now just imagine if I had a device that was like a pen, you know, but now it turns out, oh, we got into a car accident. Oh, hold on. Let me get my thing out and I wipe this over you and it heals you. Now I've wiped out your job with this technology. And there's so many people.
It's like Star Trek. Yeah, right, the doctor on Star Trek. Yeah.
But that's what we're actually up against, is people don't know what to do with this transition. You know,
it is. I mean, it is. I mean, I sometimes tell these stories, but you know, I've also met with people in the classified programs managing these, and they go, this coming out, it would be if you took everything that's been invented since the beginning of the Industrial Revolution to now, you know, 150, 200 years, choo-choo trains, all the way to what we have now that we call high tech, that isn't, frankly. Put all of that together, the implications of this area of science, technology, energy, transportation, communication, healing, medicine, what have you, would eclipse all of that combined. So it is the ultimate disruptive technology. So the good news is it's a solution to some of the most pressing problems. The bad news is it's in the hands of people who are, you know, absolutely hell-bent on only using it for destructive purposes, and it's not benefiting humanity. So I term this the lost century. There's 100 years of lost technological, social, spiritual, biological evolution on this planet because of the secrecy. People have to realize, what are the foregone opportunities? What opportunities has humanity missed in 100 years? And what are we still missing? And that's why, you know, the discussion of these issues in a serious way is really needs to be stepped up, you know, beyond the dog and pony show of the fake, you know, stuff going on in the news media and on Capitol Hill about UAPs and all that. It's just a dog and pony show set up by people trying to create a distraction from information like this that has actually been out in the public since the 50s and 60s.
You're making me wonder, now that we're talking about the medical aspect of this, and since your expertise is right here and I'm trying to decipher my experience, I sustained an injury at the South Pole and had to go to medical. And I assure you, my surgeon at the South Pole was former CIA. He was Mac V. Sog over in Laos, and he was a pilot and a surgeon way back then. He was the head surgeon on the Glomar Explorer, the Howard Hughes boat that was snatching up Soviet submarines, and he was also my head doctor at the South Pole Station for my winter season. I, in the throes of working one day, went to go move, I believe it wound up being like a 75-gallon drum of fuel or something, and I tore my bicep. The atmosphere that we were in, the low oxygen and the low humidity, I was told makes us injure ourselves more easily.
Right.
And it also makes it harder for us to recuperate. So I went to the doctor, due form, and he was basically telling me my arm was shredded, that in this environment, I need to just basically try to do nothing with it and hope that it heals, and he wasn't giving me a good prognosis on that. Like, he was telling me, like, I screwed it up badly, and because of the environment, you're not going to do well. Keep coming back and checking with me. I kind of chuckled at him because I have a history of doing well with healing, but I did respect the environment that we were in. Lo and behold, a couple weeks later, I was fine. And now I'm wondering, because we were just talking about tech and things like that, and I'm wondering, with he who he was, the program that I'm in, compartmentalization of information, our level of remoteness, the importance of keeping me functional.
Right.
Was I just rectified unbeknownst to me by something unbeknownst to me?
Probably. It's certainly feasible.
It seems like a rapid heal for a torn bicep to me, especially when I didn't really stop using it that much.
Right, right. Yeah, well, that would not surprise me, actually. So I know we just have a few minutes left. Is there anything else you want to share? We have about 10 minutes. Anything else that you've learned, you know, from this experience, or that you want to share with the general public?
I want people to reconsider the way they looked at the world up until this point. Like you're trying to impress upon everybody that, you know, things have been unacknowledged. Things, you know, have been hidden from us. And like myself, I was there with 49 other people that didn't see the things the way that I did at the time. Now we're having conversations and everybody's kind of going, oh, I want everybody to do that with everybody else. Any weird experience that you've had in your past, talk to those people again, communicate it, and share these stories. I mean, it's very important. I oftentimes say that, you know, 80%, 20%, right? 80% of your life is the same as 80% of my life. We wake up, we brush our hair, you have a mortgage to pay and car insurance and all the same things in life. But 20% of your life is going to be very individualized to you and different. Same thing for me. I think the vast majority of us get way too comfortable hiding that 20% because we don't know who to show it to. We don't know where it fits. And the world is very divisive nowadays, and it's pitting us against each other, which is horrible. We need to be more accepting and tolerant of differences so that we can learn together as a society. It's a detriment to us as a whole to not be communicating our oddities amongst our own society.
Right, exactly. And also suppressing this kind of information and experiences people have had. By the way, speaking of that, were there any personnel there that you heard who ever saw a UFO type object in the vicinity?
I did.
Oh, you did?
I did myself, yes. Actually, I was walking back from an area they call the dark sector. It was a limited amount of wind that day, which brings up, it rustles up the snow that's laying on the ground. Doesn't really drop from the air there. So there's like a low layer of snow moving across, and I was simply just trying to gauge my distance that I had remaining to get back to the facility. And when I had lifted my eyes up a couple of degrees to get over the drifting snow, from what we call grid north, the front end of the elevated station, I saw this massive, massive fireball furrowing. There's just flames all around this thing that I could see licking all over the place. And from best I could tell, it appeared to be like what I imagine would have been like a rocky or craggly surface in my mind. But again, huge and moving across the entirety of the sky. At that elevation, there's nothing else in the field of view. So I can't even begin to imagine the distance from horizon to horizon that it was covering. But it just went across the entire sky, blink of an eye, fraction of a second, faster than I can describe. And at the time, because I thought a UFO would have been, you know, a spinning disc with flashing lights and, you know, bug-eyed people, you know, waving out the window at me, I wrote it off. But in reality, it never left my mind that thing never went down. It went straight across the entire horizon. It never went down. It never changed its direction. And it was only after somebody inquired to me afterwards to reconsider that moment that I went, you know something, you're right. That was a controlled flight path. That was an unidentified flying object. It didn't crash. And there's no way that it, you know, could have done what
was this daytime or nighttime?
This was the winter time at South Pole.
Oh,
so
it was
always nighttime. Yep, it was dark. It was dark.
Yeah, of course. The winter, it's dark all the time.
Yep.
Yeah, and do you know if is Raytheon still managing that facility, or has it been passed on?
They are not. They actually, I believe they lost the contract right after us. There was an extension during our season, and I believe it was the following year that it went to, I believe it was Lockheed Martin. And then
yeah, that would fit.
Lockheed, yeah, absolutely. And then Lockheed Martin got in a weird circumstance because they did something where they tried to pass it over to Leidos, which is also a very shady company. And then something happened where they like reversed that out, and now it's kind of like third-party subcontracted through PAE.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And who was Raytheon the main or contractor? Were there other subcontractors working on that?
At the time, Raytheon was pretty much the exclusive contractor, and they have done things differently since Raytheon has exited. They have divided it out a bunch since then.
Okay.
More compartments.
Well, interestingly, many years ago, I think this would have been probably in the early 2000s, I met with a very senior executive with Raytheon, who was telling me how they had acquired E-Systems. The company used to be called E-Systems because, and E-Systems did a lot with this, with ET crap, UFO issue, all these sort of technologies. But I guess the brothers who headed up E-Systems had a conflict. They were afraid it would get into a situation where some of those projects could get disclosed. So Raytheon took in E-Systems. But E-Systems had been very involved in exactly these kinds of technologies, and of course then became part of Raytheon.
Yeah, I believe that. There's tons of little companies. I spent a lot of time as a plumbing and heating contractor on Long Island, and there is a fistful of secret little companies all over the place that are just manufacturing things, and you know, under broad daylight. You know, it looks like a little machine shop or something, but you go in there to work on their sink, and they have a Humvee in there that they're retrofitting some gear on that they're trying to get a contract for.
Right. Exactly. Well, there are a lot of companies doing it. SAIC, Booz Allen Hamilton. Certainly Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Boeing.
There's a lot of companies
out there. Dozens and dozens of them. It's our tax dollars hard at work.
Yeah, AIL, TRW.
Yes, all of those. Absolutely, TRW. So that's that's really great. Well, one of the concerns I've always had about, and I thank you for coming forward with this information, because what the Disclosure Project really is trying to do is get enough sources, from various places, so that it's this big mosaic and picture that gets developed. Because what happens if you have one person from one experience or contractor or government agency, but at this point it's between well over 900, maybe 1,000 folks like yourself that I've met with, most of whom don't want to come forward publicly because they're afraid, but that give me information or documents or very specific information. What I try to do is create that mosaic from people, like your experience with that system, what I heard from this scientist in the early 90s about the NRO getting his neutrino light detector inventions to put on satellites, your experience with the Christchurch earthquake being temporally associated with switching on this huge array at the South Pole, and then this man who had been on this contract vessel over where the Indonesian earthquake happened. And again, obviously it's a bit through a glass dimly, but the best we can do without having full access to every one of these compartmented projects, which frankly nobody does. I guess a very small handful of people might have been read in on almost all of it, is to try to do that and create an assessment. So I first wrote my comprehensive assessment on this issue in 1991, which is 30 years ago now. And now we keep updating it. And the more people like you, I just want to say, anyone listening, the more people like Eric Hecker and others who can come forward with a slice of the picture, a piece of the puzzle.
Exactly.
It really helps create the big full picture, which I think the public should know.
I agree.
So,
I just
hope. Thank you for doing it.
Thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate you giving me the time to do that and let me share this info on my end as well. It was a great chat.
Well, do you have a website where people can go to and see some of these documents and other things I know you have?
Yes, absolutely. Please. I do have documentation to prove what I'm saying. I'm not a maniac. Go to deciphering.tv, and there's an archives section there, and you can peruse if you want to hang out there. There's a chat room, talk to people about these documents, or you can download them and share them at will. I'm providing this information to be shared. I want everybody to know what's going on out there, and I just want to lead by example. Everybody is around these things. You got a document somewhere as well that means something. And if everybody can pull out one sheet of paper and put it out on the table there for everybody to take a look at, we'll all be better off for it.
Absolutely. Again, well, thank you again for your time, and I hope everybody enjoyed this. And until next time, it's Dr. Stephen Greer, and we've been very pleased to have Eric Hecker with us today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.